Hello, my name is Mariah. I'm here with the Ally Center, and I'm very excited to be doing MLA and APA with you all today. Now, you may look at me and say, no, you're not. You're not excited to do MLA and APA, but I am, all right? So I teach writing at LBC. I usually have all of the fresh out of high school students, and they swarm on in, and they say, Cynthia, would you mind popping your mute on so that I'm just hearing a little bit of an echo there. Thank you so much for joining us. Awesome. And most of them, they are not excited for writing class. They come in, they're out of high school, and they're like, I don't want to do a required writing class. I'm like, look, I'll bring the energy. Just come and be willing to learn. And then we hit the MLA class, and I'm like, okay, so this one is a little bit tougher, but hang in there with me and we'll get through it. So I'm hoping that this will be very beneficial for everyone. If it is helpful for you, if you're a hands-on learner, it might be helpful for you to open a Word document in the background and to just sort of be ready to be making edits and making notes along the way. If you like to take notes by hand, that's helpful too. But I personally find that whenever I'm doing things that are technology oriented, if it's like a feature that I'm using for the first time, or if I'm like, wait, a hanging indent, what's that? It's easier if I just do it right away. Now, we are again recording this session, but if you have questions, if you can't find something, if you're like, wait, stop, go back, please feel free to ask. This is for you. So we're so glad again that you joined. Let's dive right in. Maybe I hit the next button and then it was like, no, I'm not going next. All right. So what are we doing today? We are basically going to be reviewing 4 different things. We're going to start off with sort of an overview of philosophy of using a citation and formatting style. Why do we bother with pulling out all of our hair and trying to learn APA and then MLA and then somebody throws Chicago style in there? Like, why? So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. Then we'll go over general formatting. Now, for each of the next 3, what we're going to do is I'm going to start off with MLA, and then I'm going to show you how it's different for APA. So we're going to do the same thing with both. So we'll start off MLA and transition to APA. So we'll start off with general formatting. Then we'll talk about the citation page. At MLA, that's going to be the Works Cited page, APA, the reference page. And then we'll do our in-text citations. Again, MLA and then APA. So actually, I should have gone back, should have asked. It's all right, we'll just dive right in. So one of the reasons that we have a citation style that everybody agrees to and you say, hey, we're going to do this. Hi, Lisa. Welcome to our workshop. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, how you doing?
Great. We're just talking about the philosophy of why behind citations. So the first has to do with academic integrity. Now, obviously, as a student at LBC, we are especially cognizant of having academic integrity, as we don't just want to get away with being a good student and having good grades or whatever, but we are trying to honor and glorify the Lord, and so we want to avoid plagiarism, whether for, again, we don't want to break the school's academic policy, but also we don't want to steal other people's information. This leads right into the second reason: acknowledges original thinkers. Ideas. So I've recently experienced this a little bit more with doing research for a study on the book of Genesis. And I was doing all of this research, and you would think that Genesis is an area that, especially if you're a Christian for a while, you're like familiar with everything. No. Oh my goodness. I was doing research and I was finding all sorts of awesome stuff out there. I'm like, I have never seen this before. This is so neat. All these original Hebrew connections. This is amazing. And whenever I represent that to other people, I want to acknowledge the people who came up with those ideas first. And then, of course, the third reason there is demonstrating that honesty, that academic honesty, not just for ourselves, but for the Lord. Next has to do really with research credibility. Now, for some of us, depending on the field that you're in, this may not be a primary concern for you, but especially if you are planning to either be in a research field, or even if you're in a field where you are taking research and of any kind and you're presenting it. So for example, in my other life, I teach and write Bible studies for my church's women's group. And if I just say a whole bunch of stuff, now sometimes they trust me just because I've been with them for a little bit. But if somebody is reading what you've written and they don't know you, and maybe to them you're no different than, Joe Schmo down the street posting something on Facebook, then you want to be able to demonstrate where you've gotten your sources. For some of you who are moving into doing like your argumentative essay, having good sources is especially important whenever you're trying to convince somebody who doesn't agree with you. So they want to make sure that you have good research and that everybody has good research, so there's trust built along the way and that your arguments are really well supported. Anybody have any questions so far? That question is really just an excuse for me to take a sip of my coffee. Let's keep on rolling. Next has to do with intellectual development. Now, I'm actually doing a lot of research right now as well about using AI and how artificial intelligence is dampening our intellect and providing all of these shortcuts so we're not using our brain as much. Whenever we do source work and we do it well, we are actually sharpening our own minds. We're thinking critically about our sources, trying to examine, hey, what kind of source is this? How do I need to set this up? Is this a scholarly journal article? Is this a book? Is this just a blog? Like, well, what is this? How do I cite this? Of course, it helps to develop academic discipline, but it also helps to promote yourself as a scholar. We at LBC, we encourage all of the students not to just think of themselves as students who are just attending school to get a degree, but you're participating in the scholarly field. Whenever you do your research, you're actually contributing. And so whenever you're doing all of this research and you're starting to learn how to do all of these different things, you're contributing to the field as well. Next has to do with reader navigation. Now, I am huge on audience awareness. Whenever I first started teaching, I was really focused on just getting material all laid out. And so then I would talk and just whether they are following or not, I was like, doesn't matter, I got it out. But it's really important for us to be able to think about, hey, can my readers follow what I'm doing? And so using a standardized system of citations and formatting allows our reader to sort of figure out, hey, this is where things are. This is how I can find the sources that have been used. I always say, if somebody uses a source and they include a quote or they include a paraphrase from something that's just especially brilliant, I may want to find that later. I want to do some additional research on that myself. And so including, again, that citation information gives your readers a place to go with your sources. Of course, it also clarifies what is just yours from your own brain versus what you've learned from other people. And again, it provides that, again, just that guide for the readers to be able to know, hey, this is how to get to my sources. Whenever I'm doing my Bible study books, I usually just have sort of like the footnotes throughout the paper, and it just goes to the bottom of the page. And so they know they can always look down to the bottom of the page. But in an academic essay, a reader knows if you're using a citation style that they can go to the end of the paper and find all of your sources. I think this might be the last or second to last. It's professional. Aligns with field-specific norms, prepares you for real world writing, and facilitates peer review. Now, you may say for number 2, no, it doesn't prepare you for real world writing. I'm just going to use it for X, Y, or Z. And I will tell you, as somebody who dabbles in the academic fields and in the sort of academic world, and obviously I work here at LBC, but I don't do a ton of academic writing these days, but I do write Bible studies. And I do use a consistent citation format even for my Bible studies because I want to demonstrate that professionalism, and I want the same reasons for everything else that we've gone over. And so even if you're not using the same style of formatting as you were whenever you're in school, you being familiar with a citation formatting and knowing how to look things up that you're not familiar with will prepare you for the real world. And if you've ever done a peer review, having a standard to look back to be able to say, this is correct, this is not correct, is helpful. It just allows for the peer review process to go even more smoothly. Okay, so that's the why. Now we're sliding into each of those different areas. And before we talk about these. Let me check out the chat real quick. Okay, right, Bible study as well. Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. That's fabulous. It's my heart. Like, if I could just stop doing everything else and just write Bible studies, I might do that. No, I love you. So, MLA versus APA, those are the two that we're dealing with today because those are the two that are the most common for undergraduate studies at LBC. There are others that you may come across. I'm currently doing some research into SBL. My dad is in grad school. He's using Chicago-style Trabian, but there are more that are out there, but we're focusing on MLA and APA. And you're like, why are there so many? Why can't we just have one? And why can't we all just use the same citation style? And I agree with you 100%. However, there are more than one. So the MLA 9th edition is used for the humanities. So things like literature, commenting on scripture, philosophy, arts, etc. So if your major is in a ministry department, so if you're doing youth and young adult ministry, or if you're doing women's ministry, or anything in that field, you're probably going to be using MLA 9th edition. What's not necessarily unique about MLA, but MLA does especially emphasize the author in the page number. There's no date, which APA does use. So MLA really wants your readers to be aware of the context. Whenever I teach my students how to integrate sources into their papers for MLA, I really emphasize saying, hey, does your reader need to know anything about this source before you just airdrop it in? Or can you sort of soften the approach here? Do they need to know about their background? Do they need to know that this was a scholarly study that was performed? So context is important for MLA, and they just really want to know, hey, who said it? Why is this person important, and what page number can they find it on if that's available? Now, APA, 7th edition is the most recent edition, is all about the sciences, especially the social sciences. So psychology, sociology, education. I know we were talking earlier about criminal justice. Those are all fields where you're definitely going to be using APA 7th edition. Now, just because your major may fall into one of these things doesn't mean that you're always going to stick with one or the other. We were talking again at the beginning and saying, okay, well, yes, the major is criminal justice, and yet the last class was MLA. And so switching back and forth can definitely be hard. So APA emphasizes the date of publication. They also include the author's name and the page number, but for APA, it's science. And for science, when it was published becomes really important. So they want to know, how recent is this information? So you're always going to see a date affiliated with an APA paper for those in-text citations. And those are the big differences sort of in philosophy behind the two. Anybody have any questions before we start diving into formatting the reference page and the in-text citations? Just so you know, I use SlideSgo for my slideshows, so they are like, you just have to show our thing at the end. So there we go. That's that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to open both of our Word documents here. Okay. Just so you guys know on the back end, so I kept trying to format it so that the MLA document would be on the left-hand side and then the APA was on the right hand. I was like, I finally got it. And then it switched on me and I have no idea how. And I was like, no. So let's go ahead, jump on in. How many of you have either used MLA in the past or are in a class right now where you know that you're going to be expected to use MLA? Show of hands, give a holler. I need a couple of us. Okay. Anybody never used MLA before?
This has been the first time I used it was for my first semester, but I'm not familiar with it.
Thank you. Wait, Tina? I said it wrong.
No, that's close enough.
Close enough. Well, thank you. Thank you for your graciousness.
You're
All right. All right, cool. Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, Lisa. Great. So we all have at least some experience with MLA, maybe not a lot. What's nice is that both MLA and APA have a similar text page layout setup. So first thing I'm going to show you guys is the layout. With the layout for both MLA and APA, you want your margins to be 1 inch all around. Now, my documents are default set up that way. So if you notice, so what I did at the top is I went up to this menus area. I went to the layout menu. And then over here on the left-hand side, I went to margins and I just hit the drop down. And right now it's set to what is in this computer system titled normal. So it's 1 inch margins all around. That's what I want. So that's beautiful. I don't need to change anything there. Now you'll notice that I have pre-filled in some information for MLA. Anytime you're doing a paper for MLA, you're always going to need 3 basic things, whether it's a reflection or if it's something that requires sources, you're always going to need these 3 elements. First, on the top right-hand side, you're going to add your header, not to be confused with on the left-hand side, the heading. Whoever made that decision, none of us like them, but that's okay. We'll just roll with it. So I'll probably call something the wrong thing at some point during our workshop. That's all right. So to enter the header, depending on what you're using, you may be able to take your cursor, just hover over it and then double click. And if you double click, you'll notice that it went from grayed out to black. If that doesn't work for you and you're like, wait, that doesn't work for whatever reason, you can always go up to the menu and go to insert, the insert menu. And then Microsoft Word is very finicky. And so I always will insert the page number before I do anything else with the header. So I'll come over here all the way over toward the right-hand side, but it's sort of in the middle. And I will hit the page number drop down inside the header and footer sub menu here. And then I'm going to hover over top of page and wait for it to give me the menu options. And those options popped out on the left-hand side here. And then I'm going to come down to the 3rd one and then hit click. And I'll just show you what that looks like. See how whenever I hit the number 1, it deleted my last name? That's what's going to happen. So if you try typing your last name first and then you add the page number, it's going to delete it. And then you're going to have to go from scratch and then pull out all of your hair. So I say just go ahead and add that page number first. Then you can add your last name right next to it. And I'm going to close this right now just so we can see what I'm doing here. So, and then I like to add a space so that my last name isn't right next to the number. Now, before we exit out of the header, I do want to change the font. I like to have my entire document using the same font, the same color, the same size. For MLA, they don't want you to have any variation. Whatever you decide to use, they want you to stick with. Now, MLA and APA over the years have gotten increasingly flexible with what kind of font you use. They currently say that it can be any font between 10 and 12-point font as long as it is very readable and that you can easily distinguish between plain font and italics, the slanty letters. Now, as a professor, I will let you know that I personally love when students submit their papers with Times New Roman. I don't know why. It's a personal preference. However, most professors do have that personal preference. It's not required. It's just most professors do like it. I find it to be a little bit more readable than other fonts. So there you go. For whatever that's worth, take it, put it in your back pocket. So what I'm going to do to make this Times New Roman, because I do want to use that font, is I'm going to highlight the whole thing. Depending if you're using a Mac or a Windows device, you can hit the Command key for a Mac or the Control key for any other device. And A at the same time. I'm going to use the shortcut all the time. So Control A will highlight all. And I'm going to go to the home menu and I'm going to change the font to Times New Roman and 12-point font. Why 12-point font? Well, because y'all have page minimums. And why work harder? If you can have a larger font size, that's fabulous. Go for it. Now, right here, I have my header all set up so I can double click to exit. Then you come over here to the left-hand side and you'll notice that I'm at the top of my paper. You can see that the 1-inch margin is right here. This grayed out space lets me know that there are no additional lines above it. If I click up here, I'll actually enter the header. This is as high as my document will go. So that's, you don't want any extra space before your heading starts. You'll always type your name, just spelled out, your professor's name. I have students ask me all the time, well, how do you want me to put your name? And I personally tell them, well, it doesn't really matter, just as long as it's professional, that's fine. That's what MLA says. They say as long, like put your professor's name according to your professor's request. So if they're a doctor, you might put Dr. John Wilkins, or you might say Professor John Wilkins, or just their first and last name. Whatever they say to do, go ahead and do. The next thing you're going to put on the next line is your class code. This is different from the class name. So this class name is academic writing, research, and rhetoric. But I wouldn't put academic writing, research, and rhetoric because that's a class name, not the code. So if you don't know what your class code is, you should be able to figure it out in Canvas, or if you're like, or it's, you know, in the syllabus. If you really can't figure it out, you're having trouble navigating them, just ask your professor. They'll let you know what your class code is. You can either have spaces in between, like I do here. You can use the hyphen. You can use an underscore like that, or you can just have it all run together. Again, your professor might say that they prefer something. If they prefer something, I always just defer to whatever the professor's preferences. The last piece of your heading on the left-hand side is the date the assignment is due. A lot of students will, instead of putting the day the assignment is due, they'll put the day that they start working on the assignment. And you actually want to put the day that the assignment is due. Yeah, there was a light bulb moment right there. I love it. The other thing that is significant about MLA is that it is structured in the UK format of writing the date. So day, month, and year with no commas. And again, that is distinctive to MLA. It's just a picky thing for MLA. Anybody have any questions so far on the header and heading before we continue? Yeah.
I do. I noticed that you have the word doctor spelled out. So it's incorrect if you put DR and then the period.
It's not incorrect. It's really just your professor's preference.
Okay, okay.
Yep. Great question.
Thank you.
It's just, I'm like, oh, well, writing it out's a little bit more professional than just having DR. Maybe. So it's their preference. Great question. Anybody else? Okay. Now, the next piece of information that should go on every document, last semester I had a lot of trouble asking my students were like, I don't need a title. I'm like, you do. It doesn't need to be a creative title. Just put a title on your paper. So on the very next line down, you're going to put your title. Now, I hit the backspace button so they would align to the side so you could see that there are no additional spaces in between these. It just goes right from one line to the next. However, I am going to center this. Now, some people like to try to approximate the spacing by hitting the tab button. So they'll do something like this: tab, 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 backspace, space, space, backspace, something like that. And first of all, that's stressful. You don't need to be putting that kind of stress on yourself. And whenever you upload that to Canvas, most likely it's going to distort the formatting. Canvas and Word have a tenuous relationship. Sometimes they play nice and sometimes they don't. So instead, I recommend either using the shortcut Command or Control E for echo, or you can, if you're like, wait, I can't remember the shortcuts, you can go to the home menu. And then under the paragraph sub menu, you can just hit the center button and it'll remind you of what that shortcut is right there if you want to practice using the shortcuts. And that's that. So these three elements will be part of every single paper that you do. Now, if I am going to start the document, and I'm always going to have a tab, so this is my sample paragraph. I am so you'll notice that I hit that paragraph tab, and right here you can see that it's 1/2 inch removed from the margin. If you're looking at your Word document and you're like, wait a second, I don't see the ruler. How does she have that ruler up? if you go over to the menus, I always click on the wrong one. And you go to view. Yep, it's in view. Almost right underneath it to the left-hand side under the show submenu, you have the ruler. I always like to have my ruler box checked. It's just helpful for me to sort of navigate what stuff is going on there. Now, before we do anything else with the formatting for MLA or move on to APA, I am going to show you how to do the formatting for the paragraph spacing, the line spacing. And I usually do, whenever I'm setting up a document, do this after I've set all of these elements up. Why? Because for whatever reason, Word is, again, a little bit finicky. And sometimes if I try to set up my line spacing right away, it'll revert back to whatever its original settings were after I start writing. Why? I don't know. But so I'm going to highlight everything that I have here. So again, I'm going to use the Control A button. And then I'm going to go up to the home menu. And I'm going to still go over to that paragraph submenu. And I'm going to go into line and paragraph spacing. And I'm not just going to hit 2.0, I'm actually going to go all the way into line spacing options. I'm going to change 3 things in line spacing options. And it's all going to be under spacing. So, well, I guess 4 things. First, I'm going to set both before and after paragraph spacing to 0. Right now I have a 0 and then a ambiguous blank, which means that something wasn't set to 0. So it's a good thing I came in to check. So notice that I hit the down button, it's set to auto, but that adds space. I don't want extra space. I just want nothing extra. I'm going to check this box. Don't add space between paragraphs of the same style. I want that check mark, not just the line. And now I do want to change that line spacing to double. In your system, it might say 2.0. Once I do that, I'm going to hit OK. Before I move away from the screen, does anybody want me to pause on this a little bit longer? Or is everybody good? Rock and roll. Okay. So this is the basic setup for an MLA starting page, the basic formatting. Switching over to APA, APA is a little bit of a different ballgame. You're still going to have the layout with the 1-inch margin on all sides. You're still going to use Times New Roman or similar. You're still going to use around 12-point font. And you're still going to use double spacing throughout the entire document. So if you want me to review that, let me know. But otherwise, we're just going to keep on rolling. What's different about APA is that instead of having just the header and the heading, they do have a header on the top right. It's just going to be the page number instead of your name and the page number. Now, please note that if you are writing a professional paper, so if you are in grad school and you're writing, for example, a master's thesis, or if you're writing a doctoral paper, you will have to play around with this a little bit more to get the paper's abbreviated name, the abbreviated title in there. Student papers don't require that. So you just need to insert the page number just like we did with MLA. So you're going to have the page number and then you have this whole title page. Exciting stuff, right? So with the title page, it's a little bit loosey-goosey. You're going to start at the top and you're going to hit enter. So enter 1, 2, 3, 4, between 4 to 5 times, just sort of depending on what looks happy to you. If you have a 2-line title, then you may only want to hit enter 4 times. I liked hitting enter 5 times because then everything sort of ended up more in the middle of my paper. It's, again, they're a little bit flexible with where it ends up as long as it's close to the middle of the page. Then you're going to hit enter twice more, and then you're going to put a similar series of information, but just a little bit different. You're going to put your name. Then you're going to put whatever department you're in, and then the name of your college. And if you don't know, again, you can always check with your professor. They may not always know what department it is. You can always check with your college advisor as well, your coach, your academic coach. They can help you with that too. Then you're going to put not just the class code, but also the class name. Again, APA is a little bit more scholarly, a little bit more heavy lifting here. So Then you're also going to put, again, your professor's name, however they want it. And so we had the question before, doesn't matter if you have doctor written out. Here, I do have it abbreviated. Again, it just depends on that professor preference. That's a tongue twister right there, professor preference. And then again, the date the assignment is due. Note that here for APA, we do have it set up with month, day, comma, and then the year. So just to keep you on your toes, right? Lots of confusion everywhere. Now, how's everybody doing with the switch over to APA? Anybody want me to pause on anything? Spend a little more time on anything? I know we had some prior experience with APA. Generally speaking, most of the classes that I see people working with coming through the Ally Center are usually using MLA. However, we do get some APA. So put in your back pocket. I know some of you are definitely using it. Some of you may be like, ah, it's not quite as useful for me. We'll probably spend a little bit more time with MLA just because it tends to be more popular, but we'll again be going back to APA as well. Now, again, difference between MLA and APA. So MLA, you have your header and your heading, and then you have your title, and then you go straight into your paper. With APA, you have this whole title page, and then you're going to do something called insert a page break. Again, what a lot of my students like to do whenever they have different pages is they like to do this. I will show you. They like to do enter, 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 enter. And then they'll just do that. Now, does that kind of work? It does. Again, one of the problems is that whenever you try uploading the document to Canvas, it almost certainly will distort. And then it'll look like your page content begins right there instead of on the new page. It's just one of the ways that Canvas and Word don't play well together. So I would recommend instead using the insert button, which is up here. So if you go to the insert menu, we're going to come over to the left-hand side instead of going to the right-hand side for the page number. On the left-hand side under pages submenu, we're going to hit page break, and it's going to magically jump down. Now, this is going to be especially useful whenever we are doing our works cited and reference page, because I don't know about you, if you've ever had this situation, I've had this situation where I wanted to be setting up my works cited and reference page as I was going, and my paper wasn't quite finished, and so like I've had to jog and like hit enter and all that, but I wanted to keep it looking nice, and so I kept hitting enter, and then I kept going on to a different page. I'm like, oh my God. So if you insert the page break, then it'll keep it at the top of a fresh page for no matter how much content you write, which is beautiful. For APA, oftentimes your professor is actually going to specifically request that you use some subheadings. MLA usually doesn't use them, and usually your professor is instead going to request that you make use of transitions and cue your reader that way. APA is a lot more friendly toward, okay, look, this is science. We just want to know. We don't need to have anything fancy to get in there. Just tell it like it is. This is the next section. And so they will oftentimes specifically request for section headings. The exception is going to be for the introduction, again, unless your professor tells you otherwise. And if so, do whatever your professor says. Usually you can just go ahead and begin writing out your content. This is my introduction. All right. Now, before I do anything else, I do just want to highlight that you may notice that my spacing is off. So whenever I started this document, again, I fixed it at the beginning, and then whenever I entered a new page, Word was like, nah, we don't need to keep that formatting. So if I wanted to fix it, again, I would hit Control A to highlight the entire document. Go up to the home menu. Once I'm in the home menu, I'm going to go into paragraph, submenu, hit line and paragraph spacing. And I'm going to go all the way into options. This should be set to 0. Don't add space between paragraphs of the same style. And I want everything to be double spaced. Okay. And notice how it added that extra space in there. I don't know what wasn't set up correctly, but now it's set up correctly. So if you needed to, you would have your me. Nope, no, come on. Subheadings right there, and then you would continue writing. And again, with APA as well, there's usually not any extra spacing anywhere, either between paragraphs or between one section and another section. Same thing with MLA, there's no additional spaces anywhere. The only time you're going to have breaks in between things is whenever you are actually inserting a page break to go from one major section to the next. For MLA, it's only going to be between the paper and your Works Cited page. And then for APA, two major page breaks, one between the title page and your paper, and then again between your paper and the references section. Anybody have any questions on the general formatting before we segue into our references / works cited section?
Can you
Yes.
please go back to the title page? Because I
Sure.
think I see your the number, the page number, and then I think I wrote 1, 2, 3 to 4 to 5 spaces.
Mhm.
Now I do see you have something in bold. So is that our title?
Yes, that's a great question. This is the title. Sometimes you might have a subtitle. If your subtitle is long, you may choose to put your subtitle on this next line here. So you may say, something like that. And in that case, I might only do 4 lines down instead of 5. Because I took up 2 lines, especially if it's long. If it's really short, you can put it all on 1 line. Again, your professor may have a specific requirement. They may not want you to have a subtitle. They may require a subtitle. It's going to depend a little bit on what your professor's doing and what class you're working in. Great question, though.
Okay. How many spaces would you recommend between that in bold and then our name?
So you're just going to hit enter twice. So 1, 2. So there's going to end up being 1 blank space in between your title and then your name. Great question. Anyone else? Y'all are doing great so far. We're trekking. It's fun stuff. So now we're going to slide back to MLA, and we're just going to jump straight into the Works Cited section. Now, I already have a sample Works Cited page built so that we don't need to spend time manually creating things. I am going to go through the typical order, and I am going to go through several options for us. But you're going to see that this is already basically built. Now, again, whenever you are finished writing your paper, you have the entire thing written. At the end of that document is your Works Cited page for MLA, where all of your sources are listed. Now, this is a little bit of a culture difference between high school and college. So if you, whether you're coming right out of high school or if you've had a break, with MLA, they want you to cite anything that you are directly quoting, so anything that's word for word from another source, or even if you get the general idea of something from a source, they still want you to cite it because they are saying, hey, you got that idea from this source. What we don't want on the Works Cited page is just a whole bunch of things that you read sort of to help you explore the topic and get a feel for what's going on in the field. That's not what the Works Cited page is for. What they're looking for is saying, hey, what are specific ideas that you got from this specific source, this range of pages, this page number, this section of this article? You can point to one section of your paper that identifies it. If that's the case, then that sort of thing belongs on your Works Cited page. So whenever you set up your Works Cited page, same thing as with inserting a page break for APA with your title page to the Word document. You're going to go click. You may notice my cursor right next to the W of Works Cited. I'm going to go to the insert menu and hit page break. And like magic, it's right here. Now, just for kicks and giggles. So if I take all of this information and then I paste it a couple of times just so that we get content on the page. Okay, so notice I am now on the second page and see how it bumped my entire Works Cited page to that page 3. That's the advantage of doing a page break instead of just hitting enter. Because if I hit enter, then everything would be, who knows where it would be. But by using that insert page break, I've preserved the formatting of the document, which is beautiful. So I'm going to hit undo. So I only need that information once. Now, Works Cited is the title for your reference page for MLA. You do just want it to be plain text, W's capitalized, the C's capitalized, nothing's underlined, nothing's italicized, there's no bullets or colons or anything, it's just the words Works Cited. And then you're gonna hit enter, realign everything so that it's aligned left. And if you're like, wait, how do I align it to the left? Again, it's up in the home menu. And then you'll notice right here that I do have it aligned left. The shortcut is Control L. Now, you may notice, and if you're familiar with MLA or you just started to learn MLA or even APA, all of these are using what we call a hanging indent. And the point of the hanging indent is that it highlights a piece of information. Usually that piece of information is going to be the author's last name. And if you're doing an in-text citation, which we're going to cover last, the in-text citation will always use the author's name if it's available. So this is where your readers will go to look up a source if they find something that they think is useful while they're reading your paper. So if I wrote over here, Redo says, and you're like, oh, wow, I want to read more about how Luke is writing to a Gentile audience. And you're like, okay, so Barreto talked about that. Great. So I'm going to go down to the Works Cited page, and I'm looking for B of Barreto. And the hanging indent makes it really easy to skim and to find the last name Barreto. And so it's important not only that we have our hanging indent, but also that our entries are organized alphabetically by whatever is on the left-hand side. So let's talk about how to set up a hanging indent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the hanging indent. And then we will reset it up. Okay. So if I start and I have everything typed in and I'm like, okay, well, how do I get that hanging indent set up? So I'm going to highlight just everything that is a Works Cited entry. So I'm going to highlight from Barreto all the way down. I'm going to go up to the home menu. Going to go to, once again, line and paragraph spacing. We're really getting familiar with line and paragraph spacing today. Line spacing options. And instead of spending time and space down here under spacing, we're going to come up here to indentation. Under special, we're going to change it from none, or you may see it set up with a paragraph indent if you were typing from your above whenever you hit tab for your paragraphs. And you're going to hit hanging, and it's going to go enter by 0.5. Now, if you're using Google Docs, you're going to have to manually type in 0.5. I'm teaching out of Word because we give you access to Word through LBC, but just in case you're using Google Docs, there is a way to manually put that in as well. Hit OK, and then we see how that manually got set up there. Now, again, whenever you're setting up your Works Cited page, now I could spend a really long time talking you through each type of source and how each source is set up in the order and whatnot. But first of all, it would take us well over an hour and a half to go through that portion alone. And then we would get to additional things like, well, what about the Constitution? What about if I'm using a Bible app? What if I'm using a personal interview? And I'm like, you know, that's a great question. I'm not really sure. Let's look it up. So I am gonna show you, and I would be happy to send it over to you all as well whenever I send out the email. My favorite set of resources whenever I'm looking up questions about MLA, and I never have this actually pinned, so I always just type in owl, like the bird, Purdue, and look, it knows because it knows that I live in this space, Al Purdue. And this is always my #1 resource for both MLA and APA. I have some additional ones that I'll go to if I have additional questions, but this is my primary spot. Now, not only does it have space to look at for general formatting, so if you want to look at some samples, it has space for those as well. It has stuff on in-text citations. And then over here, it has a Works Cited page, books, periodicals, and electronic sources. The two that I use the most are books and electronic sources. I live on the electronic sources page because I always forget how to cite a YouTube page. So you can always click on that and then scroll down until you find the thing that you are looking to cite, and then copy whatever's there. Now, can you just use a citation generator? You can. Absolutely. And unless a professor, for whatever reason, tells you you can't, you can use a citation generator. I will warn you, though, I've found, especially within the last maybe 1.5 to 2 years, that the citation generators are doing worse and worse. So they're pulling information that's wrong, or they're adding information, or they're listing things in the web page title that's not a web page title. And so I think that it is useful if you can learn the basic elements and then just practice them. And then as you practice them, you'll find that it takes you less time to even to look back and to look it up to double check yourself than it is to type it all into the generator and to type it into each spot and then to try to correct it if need be. So let's say if I go over here, back to my document. Okay, so I believe this right here is a scholarly peer-reviewed journal article. It is. And I just noticed, so I missed a piece of information while I was going there. So scholarly peer-reviewed journal articles are one of the hardest things to cite in MLA because there's so much information that you need to capture. The basic information you're always going to want to include is who's the author, what's the title of the individual piece, is there a larger container that single piece is captured in? So is there a journal, or is this the chapter of a book? And then you're looking for things like, is there publication information? For a journal, there's a volume, there's issue numbers, there's pages, there's dates, all of that jazz. So that's all additional publication information. The other thing that you're going to be looking out for is, where is it found online? Most of the things that we access today are going to be online sources, especially because we live in the online world. Occasionally, you may have a print workbook, or maybe you have a book on your shelf that you're using for one of your classes. But for the most part, you're going to be using stuff that's online. And so you're going to be wanting to cite either a database or a website and then provide the link. So that's the basic sort of things to look at. But let's actually take a look at this scholarly peer-reviewed journal article just to give you a sample. So this is the author's name. So Eric D. Barreto. I noticed that I put it in the order of last name, comma, first name, and then he does have a middle initial, so I included it, and then period. If you are citing, we're not there yet. Not doing in-text citations yet, just the Works Cited. So that's there. You're next going to include the title of the article. So that's going to be this right here. You'll see that it that's this right here. This single thing is the only thing with the title Old Stories Recounted Again. For MLA, the general rule is smaller things get quotation marks. So if it's a chapter title, if it's a web page title, if it is an article title, if it's a single video on YouTube, it's a small thing, so it gets quotation marks. Next piece of information we're going to need is the title of the journal. Sometimes that's hard to see, so you may need to look around and say, okay, well, where is this information? Now, I use the Cite Article button. So if you click on the Cite Article button, oftentimes it will tell you most of the information that you need. Notice that it has Theology Today listed as the title. So I was like, okay, great. So I can use that. You may notice that this is set up for APA. So I had to change it from APA to MLA. So this is a longer piece. So this is italicized. Anything that's longer is italicized. So books are italicized, journals are italicized, website names are italicized, full-length movies or TV shows are italicized, databases are italicized. Then you're going to want to put a comma, and then the next 4 pieces of information are only if it's available. So it's going to be the volume number, the issue number, and it's unfortunate because for whatever reason, so volume is abbreviated VOL period, and then issue is abbreviated NO. I don't know why, but issue is NO. So no, say no to issue numbers. It's NO period, and then the number. Date, if they have a longer date, now they didn't for this one, but if they have the full date, you would put it in the same order as you did for the date up there. So let's say that it was published September 23rd. We'd have to change the year. September 23rd, 2024. So 24 September 2024. And notice that I did abbreviate September here because it's in the Works Cited page. You would do that on the Works Cited, not in your this thing. Heading, you would abbreviate it down here. 4 letters, abbreviated to 4 letters. So June doesn't need to be abbreviated. July doesn't need to be abbreviated. May doesn't need to be abbreviated. Some people will argue and say, nope, abbreviated to 3 letters. If they do, go ahead and just do 3, in which case June and July would also be abbreviated. Then you want the page range. Notice that it's PP period, and then whatever the page range is. Now, whenever I copied this over from the citation button, it did not include the database. So remember I said that anytime for MLA that you're providing access to the information, you always want to tell your readers, how did you find it? So I found this on Sage Journals. And you're like, how did you remember? I don't know. It's over here on the top left, Sage Journals. So that's where I found this particular article. So that's the database, the online library that I found it in. And then the link. Now for MLA, this is again a funky thing with MLA. If you have a DOI, so a DOI is a specific number that it has a living space dedicated to it online. You're going to include the full link just like this. Same thing with APA, you're going to include the link just like this. If you are citing a website that is not a DOI, or even if it's a scholarly journal article, but it's not a DOI link. So for example, this down here, right here, this source is another scholarly journal article, but you'll notice down here, this number at the end does not have a DOI. You may have noticed that I got rid of the HTTPS://. Why? Because MLA doesn't want it. Why? I don't know. I literally double checked it today. I was like, did I make that rule up? Nope. It is a real thing. So they don't want you to include HTTPS:// if the link is not a DOI. Your professor may or may not care. If they don't care, that's great. But if they do care, then that would be the sort of general rule to follow. Now, again, I'm not going to go through and name every single type of thing that you could reference. I will just note, however, for MLA, the general rule of thumb is that if you don't have a piece of information to fill in, then you just skip that slot. So for example, this source right here doesn't have an author listed. I went to this website and there's no author. It's just published on BibleVerseStudy.com. And the page is titled Division of Abijah. So this is what's going to be the leftmost thing. I'm not going to put Bible Verse Study as a group author. I'm just going to put the actual title of the page. And that's going to come in handy whenever we do our in-text citations. I know it's a lot and there's a lot still on this page, but does anybody have any questions on the Works Cited page for MLA?
I have one question, please.
Mhm.
Are we to leave the links, leave it as hyperlinks, or do we remove it?
It's up to you. If it,
Okay.
sometimes whenever you're putting them in, whenever you remove the HTTPS, it will remove the hyperlink and it won't allow you to add it back in. So for example, you see how this one, it's not, like, no matter how many times, so you could probably manually hyperlink it. If your professor tells you one way or the other, you can change it. MLA doesn't indicate a preference. It's a good question. I like mine to be consistent, but I couldn't get this one to link. So I decided it would be a good example. Any other questions before we hop over to APA? Okie dokie. So for APA, very similar. You'll notice that I have a page right here, and then I did insert a page break. And then I came down, and you'll notice that things look a little bit different. It's titled References instead of Works Cited. A little bit different. And then while you're still going to organize things alphabetically by the last name, not everything is going to be exactly the same. One of the things that you're going to do, oh, I didn't change that, is instead of having people's names spelled out, you're only going to spell out the person's last name. First names are just, you just use their abbreviations. And the reason that APA does this is because they didn't want any bias. In case somebody's reading research and they're biased one way or another, either toward men or toward women or whatever, they're like, you know what, we're going to try to get rid of that bias. We're just going to include their initials so that you don't necessarily know. So you just have E period, D period, and then you'll notice that we move the date from the end in here up to the top, because remember, for APA, they care about the recency. And so that's the next most important information for APA. That's going to go in parentheses with a period after it, after the author's name. For a scholarly peer-reviewed journal article, this needs to not be using a shortcut to make this sentence case. Nope, 2 minutes. One of the things I like the least about APA is that they have their titles written out in sentence case, which drives me nuts, but that's okay. And so you'll notice this is, there are no quotation marks here, just written out, and only the first letter of the title, and then we have the colon, the first letter after the colon is capitalized. Now, it'll jump back and forth. So journal titles are italicized, and journal titles will have all major words capitalized. Books will have, let's see. So yeah, it's a journal title. So that this book, this is a book, it's italicized. Each major word is capitalized. Prepositions aren't capitalized in either APA or MLA. Articles are not capitalized in either. So unless it's the first letter. So the T of the is capitalized because it's the first letter of the word. The other thing that you'll notice that is a little bit different is that I have HTTPS for all of my links. I also don't have a period on any of them because APA does want you to hyperlink things if possible. So they want to preserve the integrity of the hyperlink if at all possible. The other thing that you'll notice is that the way that the volume and issue are set up, the volume number is italicized. Then you have a parenthesis. If there's an issue, then you have that number right next to it, and parenthesis, and then a comma. Only if it's available. So if you don't have one, that's okay. Any questions on APA references page? Okay. So just a couple more minutes with us tonight before we'll open up for additional questions, or people do have specific things that they want to dive in on. So For in-text citations, there are essentially two ways that you can indicate to your reader that you've taken information from your source. You can either do it in the sentence itself, or you can do it at the end in a parenthetical citation. Both ways is a form of in-text citation. You're citing the author. Now, I always tell my students that whenever you're doing in-text citation for MLA, you always have to include the author's name if it's available. So author's last name is the required piece of information if it's available. So if I am citing Eric D. Barreto, if I wanted, I could say that this was published in Theology Today. So if I come up here, so in Theology Today, I need to, Barreto says, whatever. And that's probably not a page range. That's this piece of information is extra in Theology Today. I could get rid of it and it would still be cited correctly. I need to have the author's last name. Page number, if it's available, or if I was summarizing a page range, I would do 40 to 41. And that's how you would do it for MLA. There's no P, there's no anything like that. It's just right there. But you could provide this context if you think that it's helpful for the reader. You could also, let's just say that I wanted to set it up differently. So I could say in one commentator suggests. And then let's say I keep the same quote for the sake of time. I would need to add Barreto to my parenthetical citation, like that. So if I don't name the author in the sentence, I have to name them in the parentheses. If I name them in the sentence, I do not need to include them in the parentheses. And in fact, most professors will say, hey, don't do both, because if you do, then you're sort of artificially inflating the content and the length of your paper. So they'll say, hey, just stick with one or the other. You don't need both, but you do need it at least somewhere. Now, I find that most students are okay with direct quotes, and they're like, I feel pretty confident with those, and they tend to struggle whenever they're paraphrasing. I try to tell my students that, hey, just try to indicate with every line that you are paraphrasing from a source. So you may say something like, Barreto indicates Gentiles integrate. He believes that that basically just said the same thing 3 times. But now if this is all from the same page range, then I can just include that at the beginning sentence and at the end sentence. And then I'm operating under the impression that this line is also from the same page range. So I'm under the impression that all of these are from the same range of pages. Notice that I included the author's name in the first line and in the last line. That's cueing my reader that at a minimum, these 3 lines are all from the same author. But even that middle line, I still sort of gave the nod to the author. So if you find that you're having trouble distinguishing between where your voice begins and the other people's voice ends, try using some of that language, like they indicate, they believe, they conclude, they talk about how, they explain, something like that can be helpful to sort of indicate, hey, this is what they say, and then this means, and that would go into your voice and you're no longer citing. Anybody have any questions on just that piece? Now, the other issue that a lot of my students run into is whenever there is a source that doesn't have an author. If there is no author, like I said, for the Works Cited page, you're going to skip the author slot. Right here, I have division of Abijah. That's the piece of information that's highlighted on the Works Cited page by the hanging indent. And so that's actually what I'm going to cite for my in-text citation. That's what I have to cite in order to have it line up correctly. So I'm going to copy this. So if I said something like, in the article, comma, division of Abijah, I'm going to put a comma instead of a period. Luke is described as and notice I don't have any page number because it's a web article. Web articles don't have page numbers, so it's not required. You can just skip that information. Now, if I didn't want to name the article in the sentence, I could just say Luke is described in one article. Luke is described as having a concern for Gentiles. Now, for the parenthetical citation, I actually don't need to include the article's full name. I can abbreviate it. Division. MLA rules are that you should abbreviate to whatever the first noun is. So division is itself a noun, so I only need the one word. Now, a lot of my students are also using articles that all share. So for example, if they're doing a persuasive essay on abortion, sometimes they'll find multiple articles in like from encyclopedias and things like that, and they all start with the word abortion. If something is shared, then you may need to include more of the title in order to distinguish between one article and the next if you're using it for an in-text citation. But those are the basic elements of in-text citation for MLA. You may have any questions. Okay. Before we move on, one other thing I wanted to note. So if you are naming the author actually, let me just check this. Got it. Thanks, Lisa. We'll definitely send those to you. Whenever you're citing the author's name in the sentence, wherever it makes sense in the sentence is where you're going to put the author's name. However, the parenthetical citation with a page number or the article title or the author's name and the page range is always going to be at the end of the sentence. MLA doesn't want you to interrupt the flow of the sentence with the where did I get this information citation. So keep it for the end. That's different for APA. So if we hop over to APA, and I'm actually going to copy this so that we can just see how these are different. So if I come over here to our sample document. Okay. So you can include information like in theology today. However, APA is much more concerned about just getting the information in and stacking it up and saying, hey, this source is this, and this source is this, and this source is this, and providing a lot of citations to help back up what you say, as opposed to having a lot of lead in. Remember, for MLA, we talked about context and how the context is really important for MLA. APA, they're not as concerned about that. So I'm going to get rid of in theology today. And instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to take a look at the date. So this is published in 2025. It's very recent, very exciting. So I'm going to come up here and right after the author's name, I'm going to add a parentheses and put 2025. And anytime I have the author's name, I need to have the date too. So if I have this would be page. And I'm going to add commas, 2025, comma, like that. If I just have, so these are all the variations here, right? So here I named the author in the sentence. No, this is wrong. Wrong. Well, let me get it away with that silliness. Anytime wherever the author's name is, the date comes right after it. So if I have it in the sentence, the date's going to be in the sentence. Page range is always going to go at the end. Here I have all of the information at the end, and so I have the author's name, comma, the date, comma, and then the page range, and parentheses, period. And so that's just different for between, again, MLA and APA. The other thing that I forgot to mention with the reference page for APA that's a little bit different is that APA would prefer for you to include a group author if there's a group entity responsible for something instead of an article. So if I come down here, you may notice that Bible verse study is actually listed as the author instead of the website. So if that ever happens where you have a corporate entity that's also acting as the author, APA says, hey, just list it as the group author. You don't need to list it again as the site name, just list it as the corporate author, and this would then become my in-text citation. So I'm going to come up here, say on the website. Just like that. And I can't remember if there's a date available for this. There is. This is also 2025. Just like that. And those are the essential differences between MLA and APA for in-text citation is that, again, for APA, they want you to have the date right there, right in between. And if you do have multiple citations, then they want you to just put it right away, right away, right away. They don't want you to save it until the end. Anybody have any questions? All right, so thanks for sticking with it today. So what we talked about is we talked about philosophy of why do we bother with learning citations and learning formatting. We talked about the general format for both APA and MLA, looked at a couple of the differences there. We compared the references page from APA to the Works Cited page for MLA, and we talked about some of the nitty-gritty differences between the in-text citations. At the end of the day, these two, while there are some differences, they are very similar. They're the most similar, I think, out of all of the different citation systems that are out there. And so, of course, if you can just practice with one as opposed to the other, your life gets easier. But for those of you who are going to be frequently switching between the two, again, I definitely recommend making a site like Al Purdue your best friend. And if you can't remember, you can look it up. And there's no shame in looking it up and just having a site like this as a handy tool. Some other sites that I do enjoy that I have found to be helpful in the past are Scribber. So Scribber, let's see, the APA Style Blog, MLA Style Center. Grammarly oftentimes has some really, really excellent samples for you. And then there's a couple of additional citation software things that have some helpful things. Again, I will go ahead and send those all out by email for you. If anybody has any specific questions that they want to hang out and ask, you're welcome to, but I want to honor your time. So if you're like, I need to run, thank you so much again for joining us. We'll see you soon. If you are looking for additional support, you can always go to lbc.edu and then search on the top right-hand side for Ally Center. Ally Center. And whenever you hit Ally Center, first of all, you can always schedule an appointment with us. Whenever it takes us to this page, you're going to go to Ally Center Resources. And then you can come down here and click schedule an appointment. I am on the schedule, usually Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday are my biggest appointment slot days, but you can always request, shoot me an email, reply to me directly and say, hello, I'd like to schedule an appointment. Can you help me find some availability? We have lots of really excellent staff. I love all of my colleagues, so I highly recommend any of them if you're looking for help either with the writing portion, or we also provide academic mentoring services if you're struggling with time management or whatever. You can check those things out as well. We also have a whole bunch of resources available in our resources section of the library. So if you go to the library and go to the research guides under the find sub menu there, and click on academic services. Oh my goodness, we have so many resources that are available for you. My favorite spot to go is under, I always click on the wrong one. Yep, Introduction to Academic Reading and Writing. On the right-hand side, you can look at our resource videos and it will show you all of our different previously recorded and published workshops. That's super fun, but we also have all of this different information for you all to reference. If you're looking to see when we have additional workshops coming up, you can be on the lookout for those continual emails, or if you go back into our research guide, you can click on Ally Center and it will tell you, hey, these are all of our upcoming workshops. So if you're looking for additional support, definitely check back in. We're excited to have you. So thank you all again for joining.